At my father's funeral, she whispered to my family, "He's next, and I get everything." They looked at her in horror. I said nothing, but when the will was read, her face told a different story. The day we buried my father was gray and cold, the kind of weather that seeps right into your bones. I stood there, watching the casket lower, feeling that hollowed-out numbness that comes after a great loss. My father was my hero, a brilliant, tough but fair man who built a business from nothing. Losing him felt like losing my anchor. Beside me, my wife of 3 years, Isabella, squeezed my arm. It should have been a comfort. It felt like a vulture claiming its perch. Later, at the reception at my father's house, the feeling got worse. The house was filled with the low murmur of conversation, friends and family sharing memories. I was talking with my dad's old business partner when I noticed Isabella across the room. She wasn't grieving, she was assessing. Her eyes scanned the room, the expensive art on the walls, the well-dressed guests. She was calculating. I moved through the crowd, needing a moment of quiet. I ended up near the study, just out of sight in the hallway, when I saw her talking to my Aunt Carol and Uncle Ben. They looked exhausted, their faces etched with grief. Isabella, on the other hand, was animated, a small, smug smile on her face. She leaned in conspiratorially, thinking no one else could hear, and then she said it. The words that shattered the last bit of my grief-numbed world. "It's a shame about his heart," she whispered, her voice like poison. "It just gave out. You know, the doctors say Alex has the same condition. It's genetic." She paused, letting that lie sink in, then delivered the final blow. "He's next, of course, and then I get everything." My aunt gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My uncle's face went from pale to a deep, furious red. He looked like he was about to physically throw her out of the house. Isabella just stood there, basking in the horror she'd created. She thought she was announcing her victory. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. Every time she'd been a little too interested in my father's health, every question about our finances, every little act of selfishness, it all clicked into place. This wasn't my wife. This was a predator who had been waiting patiently for her payday. There was no anger, no shouting match, just a sudden, absolute calm. The part of me that had loved her died right there in that hallway. I stepped out. I didn't look at my aunt or uncle. I looked right at Isabella. I didn't have to say a word. The look on my face must have been enough. The smug smile vanished from her face, replaced by a flicker of fear. She saw that I had heard. I held her gaze for a few seconds, letting her understand that the game was over. Then I turned and walked away. That night, I didn't go back to the home we shared. I told her I was staying at my father's house to sort through his things. She didn't argue. She knew she'd made a mistake, and her best move was to lay low, but it was too late. The damage was done. The first thing I did once the door was closed was call Mr. Davies, my father's lawyer, and a man I'd known my whole life. "Mr. Davies, it's Alex. Something has happened. We need to meet. First thing in the morning, and please bring my father's most recent will." My second call was to a private investigator. A friend had used him for a corporate case and said he was the best. "I need a full background and surveillance on my wife, Isabella. I want to know everything. Who she talks to, where she goes, who she's been seeing. Everything. Discretion is paramount." My third action was to log into my bank accounts. Isabella loved to spend. We had a joint checking account for household expenses, which I funded. I transferred 95% of the balance into a new account under my sole ownership, leaving just enough to cover the mortgage and utilities for a week. I then went through our joint credit cards, the ones with the sky-high limits, and lowered their limits to the bare minimum. I couldn't cancel them without her noticing immediately, but I could make them essentially useless. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my father's study, surrounded by the smell of old books and his leather chair, and I planned. She didn't just want a divorce, she wanted me dead. She wanted my inheritance. Well, she was about to find out what happens when you mistake a grieving son for a weak one. Update 1. It's been a week. A long, quiet, brutally efficient week. Thank you to everyone who sent messages of support. You have no idea how much it helps to know I'm not overreacting. Isabella has been a model of a loving, supportive wife all week. She's been sending me concerned texts, offering to bring me food, asking when I'm coming home. It's a performance, an attempt at damage control. She thinks if she pretends her monstrous statement never happened, I'll eventually just forget it, chalk it up to a moment of stress. She has no idea what's been happening behind the scenes. The meeting with Mr. Davies was exactly what I'd hoped for. My father, it turns out, was much more aware of Isabella's nature than I ever knew. About 6 months ago, he had his will completely redone. The reading of the will was this morning. We all gathered in Mr. Davies's office. Me, my aunt and uncle, and Isabella, who was dressed in a ridiculously expensive black dress, trying to look the part of the grieving daughter-in-law. She was practically vibrating with excitement, the greed rolling off her in waves. Mr. Davies began to read. It was mostly standard stuff, some bequests to charity, some personal items to my aunt and uncle. Then he got to the main part of the estate. The business, the property portfolio, the investments, the bulk of his life's work. All of the remaining assets, Mr. Davies read, his voice steady, including all shares in the company, all real estate holdings, and the entirety of my investment portfolio, I leave to my beloved son, Alex. Isabella's face lit up. She reached over and squeezed my hand, whispering, "We did it, honey. We're set for life." I didn't react. I just looked at Mr. Davies, who continued reading. These assets are to be placed into a specifically designed, irrevocable trust, of which my son Alex will be the sole beneficiary and trustee. The terms of this trust are absolute. He paused and looked over his glasses, first at me, then directly at Isabella. The trust includes a specific provision. In the event of my son's divorce from his current wife, Isabella, she shall be entitled to no part of any asset held within this trust. Furthermore, in the event of my son's death while still married to Isabella, she is also explicitly disinherited from this trust. All assets will pass to my sister Carol, to be held in trust for her children. This provision supersedes any and all prenuptial or postnuptial agreements. The silence in the room was absolute. Isabella's hand dropped from mine. The triumphant smile on her face curdled into a mask of pure, ugly disbelief. What does that mean?" "It means," my Uncle Ben said, his voice hard as iron, "that you get nothing, not a single damn penny." Isabella shot to her feet, her face contorted with rage. "This is insane. He can't do that. Alex, you have to fight this. This is an insult. This is our money." "No, Isabella," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It was never going to be our money. It's my father's legacy, and he protected it." She started screaming then, about how we were conspiring against her, how the will was fraudulent, how my father was a senile old man who had been manipulated. Mr. Davies just sat there, unmoved, until she finally ran out of breath and stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her. My aunt looked at me, her eyes filled with a sad understanding. "Your father knew. He knew all along, didn't he?" "Yes," I said. "He did." The first letter from her new, very expensive lawyer arrived that afternoon. It was full of bluster, challenging the will, claiming my father was of unsound mind, the usual nonsense. We were ready for it. But the real bombshell landed on my desk this evening. The preliminary report from the private investigator. It seems Isabella hasn't just been cruel. She's been busy. For the last year, she's been having an affair with a man who calls himself a financial planner. The PI has photos. He also has copies of emails between them. They're not just romantic, they're strategic. They discuss my precarious health. They talk about how to structure her future assets after I'm gone. They even have a list of offshore accounts they plan to open. She wasn't just waiting for me to die. She was actively planning for it. This has gone far beyond a divorce. This is something much, much darker. And she has no idea that I know everything. Update 2. It's been a month since the will reading. The situation has escalated, just as I knew it would. Isabella is still living in my house, our house for now, but we are like ghosts to each other. I sleep in the guest room. We don't speak. The air is thick with her hatred. Her legal challenge to the will is going nowhere, and she knows it. My father was meticulous. He had a full psychological evaluation done the same day he signed the new will, specifically to counter any claims of senility. Her lawyer is burning through her money with nothing to show for it. That's where the desperation tactics started. 2 weeks ago, I got a call from my company's HR department. An anonymous complaint had been filed against me. It claimed I was unstable due to grief, behaving erratically, and making poor financial decisions that could endanger the company. It was a clear attempt to get me suspended or fired, to damage my reputation and ability to control my father's business. Fortunately, I had anticipated this. The week after the funeral, I had a private meeting with the board of directors, which includes my uncle. I told them everything. About Isabella's comment, about the will, about the impending ugly divorce. I had their full support. HR investigated the anonymous claim and dismissed it within 48 hours. Next, she tried to create a public scene. She showed up at a charity dinner I was attending, an event my family has sponsored for years. She was dressed to the nines and caused a scene at the entrance, crying to the security guards that her cruel husband had locked her out of her own life and that she just wanted to be with him. It was a pathetic performance. I had security quietly escort her out. A few people noticed, but the story she tried to spin of a grieving widow being cast aside didn't stick. People know my family. They know me, and they are starting to see her for what she is. The financial pressure is mounting on her. The credit card limits are basically zero. The joint account is empty. I know for a fact she has sold several of her expensive watches and handbags to pay her lawyer's retainer. She's trapped. She's living in the lap of luxury, but can't afford to buy a cup of coffee. This is where my plan comes in. It's a risk, but I think her greed will make her blind to the danger. Through our lawyers, I made her an offer. An offer that looked, on the surface, like I was caving. I offered to dissolve my father's trust and split the entire inheritance with her. 50-50. A clean break, with hundreds of millions of dollars on the table for her. Her lawyer was immediately suspicious. He called my lawyer, asking what the catch was. My lawyer played his part perfectly. He told him that I was exhausted, that the fighting was affecting the business, and I wanted it to be over. That I still, on some level, cared for Isabella and wanted to see her taken care of, despite the pain she'd caused. There was only one condition, a simple one. Before we could proceed, she had to sign a sworn, legally binding affidavit. In it, she would have to state, under penalty of perjury, that our marriage had always been one of mutual love and fidelity, that she had always acted in my best interests and with my health and well-being as her primary concern, and that all of her actions since my father's death had been those of a faithful, grieving wife. It's a trap. A beautiful, simple trap. It's a document of lies. My lawyer told me her attorney strongly advised her against signing it. He knew it was too good to be true. But Isabella, blinded by the number of zeros on the page, overruled him. She thinks I'm weak. She thinks I've broken. She sees this as her ultimate victory, proof that she was right all along. She told her lawyer that I was just a sentimental fool and that she was going to sign the papers and take the money. The signing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. She has no idea that the private investigator's final report is sitting in a locked briefcase in Mr. Davies's office. A report that contains everything. Photos of her with her lover, transcripts of their text messages, planning my financial ruin, even a recording of her lover complaining that she needed to speed things along. Tomorrow, she's going to walk into that office and sign her own death warrant, and I will be there to watch. Final update. This will be the last time I post about this. The story is over. Yesterday morning, we all met in Mr. Davies's conference room. Me, my lawyer, Isabella, and her lawyer, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The affidavit was on the table. It was a 5-page document filled with the most poetic lies you can imagine, all attesting to her undying love and fidelity. "Are you sure you want to do this, Isabella?" her lawyer asked one last time, his voice heavy. "Just give me the pen," she said, her voice dripping with arrogance. She signed each page with a flourish, a triumphant smirk on her face. She slid the document across the table. "There. Now let's talk about wiring my half of the money." Mr. Davies took the signed affidavit and placed it neatly into a folder. Then he pulled out a second, much thicker folder and placed it on the table. "Before we discuss the transfer of funds," he said, his voice cold, "we have one more document to review." He opened the folder and turned it around for her to see. The first page was a high-resolution photograph of her and her lover kissing on the balcony of a hotel room taken 2 months ago. Her face went completely white. My lawyer then began to speak. That is the report from a private investigator hired by my client. It details your 18-month-long affair with Mr. Thompson, your so-called financial planner. It includes copies of emails and text messages where you and he conspire to defraud my client of his inheritance. It also includes conversations where you discuss my client's fictional heart condition and your desire for him to pass away sooner rather than later. You let that sink in. Isabella looked like she couldn't breathe. Her lawyer had his head in his hands. And this, my lawyer said, tapping the affidavit she had just signed, is a sworn statement in which you commit perjury on multiple counts. You have just attested under oath to your fidelity and your concern for my client's well-being. This report proves that not only are you an adulterer, but you have been actively conspiring against your husband with criminal intent. Isabella finally found her voice. It was a strangled whisper. You can't prove any of that. It's all lies. On the contrary, Mr. Davies said, we have sworn testimony from hotel staff, digital forensic evidence from your email server, and several audio recordings. I believe the district attorney's office will find it all very compelling. Her lawyer stood up abruptly. We're done here. This negotiation is over. He looked at Isabella with utter disgust. You are on your own. I am no longer representing you. And then he walked out of the room. That was it, the checkmate. Isabella just sat there, completely broken. The fight was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was the pathetic, greedy person underneath. The divorce was finalized last week. She didn't fight it. She couldn't. She signed everything we put in front of her. She got nothing, not a single cent from me or my father's estate. She had to use the last of her money to hire a criminal defense attorney, because yes, the district attorney is now investigating her and her lover for conspiracy to commit fraud. She was forced to move out of the house. I had the locks changed the day she left. I heard she's living in a tiny, run-down apartment on the other side of the country, trying to avoid prosecution. Her lover is nowhere to be found. He cleared out his accounts and disappeared the day after the meeting. My revenge wasn't about being loud or destructive. It was quiet. It was precise. I used her own greed, her own arrogance, her own cruelty against her. She built her own cage, and I just held the door open while she walked into it and locked it from the inside. She thought my father was a fool, and she thought I was a weak, grieving boy she could manipulate. They were the two biggest miscalculations of her life. My father's business is thriving. I'm running it now, with my uncle by my side. I feel his presence every day, and I know he would be proud. The house is quiet now. It's my home again. The poison is gone. She wanted everything. And in the end, that's exactly what she lost. Thanks for letting me share my story, Reddit. It's time to close this chapter for good. At my own birthday party, my girlfriend said, I can't post this picture. You look poor next to me. I said, okay. Then I stood up, took the mic, and showed the whole party the before pictures of her I'd been saving. Before I paid for her car, her apartment, and her new face. Not exactly how I planned on spending my 32nd birthday, but here we are. First, some background. I grew up in a working-class family, busted my ass through engineering school on scholarships and part-time jobs, and founded my own tech company in 2017. The first 3 years were brutal. Ramen noodle diet, sleeping on friends' couches, the whole struggling entrepreneur cliché. But in late 2020, we developed a security software that caught the attention of some major clients, and suddenly money wasn't an issue anymore. We're not talking Bezos-level wealth, but enough that I don't have to check my bank account before buying something. I still drive a 2015 Honda and wear the same 5 graphic tees in rotation because honestly, I'm just not interested in flashy stuff. My parents raised me to value financial security over status symbols. I'd rather invest the money or have experiences than walk around with designer labels. I met Tiffany in early 2021 at a charity event. She was working for the nonprofit hosting it, coordinating donors and looking absolutely stunning while doing it. What drew me to her was how passionate she was about the children's education initiative they were fundraising for. She spoke eloquently about creating opportunities for kids from underprivileged backgrounds. It resonated with me since I'd been one of those kids who needed scholarships to make it through college. We hit it off immediately. She was beautiful, yes, but also seemed genuinely interested in my story and my company's mission. Our first few months together were amazing. We'd have deep conversations about everything from social inequality to the future of tech. She introduced me to art galleries and fancy restaurants. I showed her my favorite hole-in-the-wall places and got her into sci-fi movies. About 6 months in, around fall 2021, she mentioned she was struggling financially. The nonprofit job paid terribly, and she was thinking of leaving the sector altogether to make ends meet. I was heartbroken. Here was someone doing meaningful work she was passionate about, being forced out because of money. I offered to help with some of her expenses until the nonprofit's next funding cycle, when she was promised a raise. It started small, covering her car payment 1 month when she came up short, helping with rent when her roommate suddenly moved out, all with the understanding that this was temporary support to keep her in the job she loved. Then came the medical issue in spring 2022. She'd always been insecure about her nose, a result of breaking it as a teenager, and her health insurance wouldn't cover the corrective surgery since it was deemed cosmetic. She was in genuine physical discomfort, with breathing problems and frequent infections. Seeing her in pain, I offered to pay for the surgery. It wasn't even a hard decision. I had the means to help someone I cared about. By summer 2022, her nonprofit lost a major funding source and had to cut staff. Tiffany was devastated. She moved in with me while job hunting, and I helped her lease a more reliable car since her old one kept breaking down during interviews. The lease was in my name because her credit score wasn't great, and I could get a much better rate. Again, these weren't handouts in my mind. They were investments in our partnership. I could easily afford it, and it seemed like the right thing to do for someone I loved who was going through a rough patch. By early 2023, she'd found a new job at a marketing agency with better pay but less meaningful work. She decided she wanted her own space again, which I understood. We'd moved in together out of necessity rather than choice. I helped her find a nice apartment, and since the landlord required proof of income history she didn't have yet, I co-signed the lease. The arrangement was that I'd help with the rent until she was fully on her feet with the new job. Gradually, though, I started noticing changes. Tiffany began spending more time with a new friend group, all Instagram influencer types with seemingly unlimited shopping budgets. Her wardrobe transformed from simple professional attire to designer everything. She started talking about building her brand and became obsessed with social media presence. The passionate conversations about social causes dried up, replaced by discussions about follower counts and engagement metrics. At first, I attributed her new spending habits to her improved salary, but the math didn't add up. When I gently asked about it, she mentioned brand partnerships and influencer deals that provided free products. Later, I discovered she was also maxing out credit cards to maintain her new image. Still, I made excuses. She was going through a career transition, finding herself networking. Plus, after her surgery and style upgrade, she genuinely seemed happier and more confident. If my success could provide that for her, wasn't that a good thing? As our relationship evolved, so did an odd dynamic where she'd occasionally buy me expensive gifts. A watch here, a designer jacket there, despite her own financial situation being precarious. I could tell these gifts were more about how they'd look on her social media, my amazing boyfriend in the Armani I surprised him with, than about what I'd actually want. My birthday rolled around last weekend, and Tiffany insisted on throwing me a big party at an upscale venue. I'm not one for being the center of attention, but she was so excited about planning it that I went along. She invited a mix of my actual friends and her new influencer crowd. The party was lavish, way more extravagant than anything I would have chosen for myself, but it was admittedly fun seeing my college roommates mingling with work colleagues and neighborhood friends. Tiffany was in her element, playing hostess and looking gorgeous in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. During dinner, someone suggested taking a group photo. We all gathered, and one of my old friends took several shots with my phone. When I checked them afterward, I thought they looked great. Everyone smiling, good lighting, a perfect memory of the night. I showed Tiffany, expecting her to ask me to send them to her. Instead, she frowned and swiped through them rapidly. "I can't post any of these," she said quietly. "Why not?" I asked. She hesitated, then leaned in and whispered, "Honestly, you look kind of poor next to me. Couldn't you have at least worn the Armani jacket I got you instead of that old blazer?" It's embarrassing. The blazer in question was my favorite, a well-made, comfortable piece I'd had for years. Nothing fancy, but certainly not shabby. More importantly, it was a gift from my parents when I landed my first engineering internship. It had sentimental value. Something inside me just snapped. 2 years of accumulated realizations crystallized in that instant. This wasn't the woman I'd fallen for. That woman had been a mirage, or maybe just a temporary phase of the person standing before me now. "Okay," I said calmly. Then I stood up. The venue had a small stage area where the 4-piece band had been playing earlier. I walked over, picked up the microphone, and tapped it to get everyone's attention. The room quieted. "Thanks everyone for coming tonight. Seeing all your faces in one room means more to me than you know." People raised their glasses, smiling expectantly. Tiffany looked confused but pleased, probably assuming I was about to make some loving acknowledgement of her party planning efforts. I want to share something with you all. A little before and after story. Earlier that day, I'd actually asked the venue about their AV setup for any potential speeches or toasts. They'd shown me how to connect to their system and had even tested my phone with it, so I knew it would work. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the venue's AV system. The large screen behind the stage lit up with a photo of Tiffany from when we first met. She was beautiful then too, but in a natural way, slightly crooked nose, sensible clothing, genuine smile. "This is the woman I fell in love with 2 years ago," I said, passionate about education reform, full of empathy and intelligence. I swiped to another, before, picture. Tiffany in jeans and a t-shirt at a volunteer event, painting a classroom at an underfunded school. This is the woman who spent weekends helping renovate schools in low-income areas because she believed every kid deserves a beautiful place to learn. Tiffany's expression had transformed from confusion to horror. She started walking toward the stage. I swiped again, showing her ancient Toyota with the bumper held on by duct tape. This was her car. Not pretty, but she was proud of it because she'd bought it herself with her nonprofit salary. Another swipe. Her small, somewhat shabby apartment with mismatched furniture. And her apartment with the roommate who was always late with rent, which meant Tiffany often covered for her because everyone deserves safe housing. By now, Tiffany had reached the edge of the stage, her face a mixture of fury and mortification. And then came the changes, I continued. I showed a shot of her post-surgery, the designer clothes, the new car, the Instagram posts flaunting luxury goods, all captioned as if she'd earned them herself through some vague entrepreneurship that never quite materialized. Here's Tiffany now. Beautiful, stylish, living in a great apartment. And just now, she told me she's embarrassed to be photographed with me because I look poor next to her. The room had gone completely silent. Even Tiffany seemed frozen. The irony is, I paid for all of it. The nose job she claimed was for medical reasons. $20,000. The car lease, $800 a month. The apartment, $2,400. The clothes, the shoes, the handbags she showcases on Instagram as if she's some self-made success story. All funded by the guy who apparently looks too poor to be in her photos. I put the microphone down for a moment, took a breath, and looked directly at her. I never minded supporting you, Tiffany. I minded that you became someone who could stand next to the man who provided all those things and be embarrassed by him. Because his clothes aren't expensive enough for your social media brand. The silence was deafening. Some people were staring at their plates, others were wide-eyed, looking between Tiffany and me. So this seems like a good time to announce that our relationship is over. The apartment lease we co-signed? I'll be giving the landlord the legally required 30 days notice that I'm removing myself as guarantor. The car lease in my name will need to be transferred to you or returned to the dealership within the same time frame. And this, I gestured around the room, is the last event I'll be financing. Happy birthday to me. I set down the microphone, walked off the stage, and headed for the exit. My closest friends immediately followed me, forming a protective huddle as we left. From behind, I could hear the murmurs turning into a full-blown commotion. Once outside, my college roommate Pete just shook his head and said, "Dude, that was both the most badass and most heartbreaking thing I've ever seen. Are you okay?" I wasn't, but I would be. Tiffany blew up my phone for the next 48 hours, alternating between tearful apologies, vicious accusations, and desperate bargaining. I blocked her number on day 3. Through mutual friends, I heard she'd posted a teary, My Truth video about how I had financially abused her by holding money over her head and then humiliating her publicly. The video didn't get the sympathy she'd hoped for, especially since several people who'd been at the party commented with their own accounts of what really happened. When I returned to my house after staying with a friend for a couple days, I found she'd moved most of her things out. She'd been splitting her time between my place and her apartment for months, gradually moving back to her own place as her career picked up, so there wasn't much to pack. Still, I changed the locks as a precaution and asked my lawyer to draft a formal letter outlining the financial separation timeline and process. It's been 2 weeks now. I've met with a lawyer to make sure all financial entanglements are properly severed. The apartment management company has been notified of my intent to remove myself from the lease, giving Tiffany the legally required 30 days to either qualify on her own or find a new guarantor. I've arranged with the car dealership to either transfer the lease to her name if she qualifies or return the vehicle after the same 30-day period. I've reset all my passwords and frozen my credit as a precaution. The emotional part is harder to clean up. I keep questioning how I missed so many red flags, how I convinced myself I was supporting her dreams when I was really just bankrolling her transformation into someone who ultimately looked down on me. The girl from that first photo, the one with the crooked nose and genuine passion for helping kids, I still miss her. But I'm starting to accept that she either never really existed or disappeared somewhere along the way. My friends have been incredible, especially the ones who knew me before I had money. They've reminded me that generosity isn't the problem here. It was just misplaced. They've crashed at my place, dragged me out for beers, and let me rant without judgment. I'm sharing this partly as a cautionary tale. Money does strange things to relationships. It doesn't automatically make you a simp or a doormat to support someone you love. But when that support becomes one-sided entitlement, when genuine appreciation transforms into embarrassment about being seen with you, that's when you need to walk away, no matter how much you've already invested. As a final note, the nonprofit where I met Tiffany does amazing work. I've set up a recurring donation in my company's name, anonymously. I still believe in their mission, even if my experience with one of their former employees went sideways. Some dreams are still worth investing in, even after you've been burned. Edit. Many people have reached out with questions and comments about this situation. Here are responses to the most common ones. Some folks are asking if I publicized her failings for revenge. Maybe partly, it was a spontaneous reaction to years of building resentment. Not proud of the public nature, but I stand by the content. The people at that party deserved to know who they were really dealing with. Others questioned why I'd support her financially in the first place. It wasn't about buying affection. Initially, it was helping someone passionate stay in a job that mattered but paid poorly. I've been fortunate enough to achieve financial security. Using some of that to support a partner's meaningful work felt right. The problem wasn't the support itself, it was how it changed her. On keeping receipts of her before pictures, I didn't have a revenge file saved up. Those were just normal photos in my phone from our early days. Everyone has pictures throughout their relationship. The contrast between then and now just became increasingly stark. A surprising number of people shared similar stories of partners who changed dramatically with increased access to money. It's unfortunately common, it seems. Several commenters asked about red flags I missed, which is fair. Looking back, she gradually stopped talking about the causes she once championed, started referring to her time at the nonprofit as slumming it, began making subtle digs about my clothing choices and car, talked differently when her influencer friends were around, showed more excitement about expensive gifts than experiences together. For those concerned about my financial security, I'm fine. These expenses were within my means. I'm not wealthy enough that the money doesn't matter at all, but this hasn't impacted my company or long-term plans. Finally, for everyone suggesting I date someone in my league financially next time, that's not the lesson here. Financial compatibility matters, but values matter more. I'd rather be with someone of modest means who appreciates genuine connection than someone wealthy who measures people by their brands. Eat It 2, 4 months later, April 2024. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. About a month after my last update, I received an email from Christina, the executive director of the nonprofit where Tiffany used to work. She'd heard about what happened, small world, and reached out to make sure it wouldn't affect my company's donations to their programs. We met for coffee to discuss the organization's upcoming initiatives. Christina has been running the nonprofit for almost a decade, turning down lucrative corporate offers because she believes so strongly in their mission. She's smart, driven, and refreshingly straightforward. What was supposed to be a quick meeting turned into a 3-hour conversation about education reform, technology accessibility in underserved communities, and how businesses can create meaningful social impact beyond just writing checks. We've been dating for about 3 months now. It's completely different from my relationship with Tiffany. Christina is established in her own career, owns her modest condo, and has never once commented on my choice of vehicle or clothing. Our dates range from hiking trails to community events to quiet dinners at either of our places. When I offered to help fund a new program her organization couldn't otherwise afford, she insisted on formal documentation through the nonprofit's official channels. No blurring of personal and professional lines. As for Tiffany, she managed to qualify for the apartment lease on her own after getting a better-paying job in marketing. The car went back to the dealership. She couldn't qualify for the payments. I've heard through mutual connections that she's dating a minor reality TV personality now. Her Instagram is full of tropical vacations and designer hauls, though no one seems clear on how they're funded. I wish her well, but feel nothing but relief when I see those posts. The birthday blazer still hangs in my closet. I wore it on my first date with Christina, who complimented it without knowing its significance. When I told her the story later, she said something I'll never forget. The things that remind us where we came from are priceless. No designer label can compete with that. I don't know where this relationship is heading, but it feels built on something solid. We value the same things, respect each other's independence, and connect on a level that has nothing to do with material possessions. If there's a lesson in all this, maybe it's that the right person doesn't need to be upgraded or maintained. They just need to be appreciated for who they already are. For everyone who offered support during this whole saga, thank you. Those early days after the breakup were tougher than I let on, and knowing I wasn't alone in that experience helped more than you know. If my story prevents even one person from ignoring the red flags I missed, then something good has come from it.